Matthew, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to speak to such a distinguished audience in such an amazing location. I did want to touch on those two topics, so nickel, but then that will link into, I think, the more interesting topic and the more relevant topic, which is about price discovery in commodities and why we're so proud to partner with MetalsHub and what we think we can do together. So if I start off, I'm sure many people in this room, as we said, use nickel, and even if you don't, I'm sure you've read about nickel and the challenges that we at the LME have had with nickel. And I would start off by saying that we fully understand the disruption and the difficulties of last year's events, March 2022, and the impact that they've had, I'm sure, on many people in this room. And what I wanted to do was to provide an explanation and hopefully some reassurance as to the work that we're putting in at the LME to try to rebuild that trust, rebuild that confidence in the LME's nickel market. So, as you'll recall, back in March 2022, we did have to suspend nickel trading, and nickel trading didn't happen for a number of days after the price spiked very significantly, and subsequent investigation suggested that a key contributor to that was large short positions in the over-the-counter nickel market, which had, it turns out, a very big impact on the LME market. So what we recognized is that we needed to do a lot of work, to make a lot of investment to, as we say, strengthen the market and re-compete for people's trust and people's business. So this slide captures some, or really all of the steps that we're taking to try to do that. So at the top, we have the things we're doing to strengthen, to prevent or to minimize the risk of these events happening again. But at the bottom, and I think it's very relevant for the topic of this conference, to modernize. Because although the LME has been around for 140 years, we feel very strongly that pricing mechanisms in commodities, including ourselves, need to modernize themselves. So what have we done? The immediate things that we did with the nickel market, and actually all of our metals, was to introduce daily price limits to stop that spiking happening again. OTC position reporting, so getting data about over-the-counter transactions where they could have an impact on what's happening on the LME's market. Enhanced risk controls internally. And then we have now reopened nickel trading in Asian hours because we understand that's very important for liquidity. But going forwards, what we recognize is that the nickel market is very much evolving. And what I wanted to touch on is this graph, which I think is really fascinating, which shows you in blue the LME Class 1 nickel price, so the price for cathodes or rounds, and you can see obviously that huge spike in 2022. And the red line is, it's actually the SMM, so the Chinese or the Asian nickel pig iron index, so Class 2 nickel, so effectively Class 1 versus Class 2. And what you'll see is that through many of the last years leading up to 2022, there was this very strong, effectively, alignment between the two prices. And the real story of 2022 was that disalignment of Class 1 and Class 2 supply. And a big part of what we've been doing at the LME as we seek to rebuild that confidence in nickel is to really understand and think about that relationship between the Class 1, the very commoditized, standardized nickel cathode, and the Class 2, which, as I say, we've shown NPI, but as we all know, there's a whole range of Class 2 products, and it's a much more complex market to analyze and to price. So we certainly don't seem to be returning to the days in that blue chart where the price was pretty much aligned. And I don't think that's surprising, because if you look at what's happening in Asia, particularly the opening of Class 2 supply in Indonesia, there is this huge Class 2 supply, which you could argue is going to keep that differential that opened up in 2022. You could argue that that's going to stay open. So we're not at the LME saying that we expect those to converge, right? We're not market analysts, but if you ask my view, I think there are structural reasons why those two lines may stay apart. I take a bit of confidence from the fact that if you look at the correlations in 2023 are actually pretty similar to what they were back in the blue period. So although the gap has opened up, the price correlation is reestablished to a large extent. And that does make sense to me, because if you look at what we're doing on this line, we have the fast tracking of some new Class 1 nickel suppliers. And you may have seen that we've brought, for example, Huayu nickel into the LME supply. And that's been driven by a lot of technology, particularly in China, which is able to convert between Class 2 and Class 1. So from a metallurgical perspective, you may expect that those prices are going to start to be more correlated, if not aligned. Again, I'm not an analyst, but that's what you might think would happen from a pricing perspective. So I think that then leads to really the broader topic that's really interesting to explore today, which is about pricing. Because what we know is that for much of this blue period, the market was using the LME Class 1 price as a proxy for their Class 2 exposure. And obviously, from an exchange's perspective, yeah, maybe that's a good thing in terms of volumes, but we saw that it can have some negative ramifications if producers are hedging Class 2 on a Class 1 contract, because in a squeeze scenario, you can't deliver the metal, and that's a lot of what we saw in 2022. So I think that really puts a big premium on Class 2 pricing solutions. And what we've said is, at the LME, we want to be the Class 1 market. We want to make sure that the LME contract is the benchmark for Class 1, and that's what we're doing. We want to make the Class 1 price usable to do price 2 hedging if that's what people want to do. But we recognize that the market has evolved and that it may be appropriate to have specific Class 2 pricing solutions. And you can see that up there, a Class 2 nickel spot offering. Because that really goes to my central belief, which is the LME, our market, is really good at pricing those very commoditized, those very standardized copper, grade A cathode, nickel, aluminium billet, whatever it might be, ingot, whatever it might be. But as we go along the value chain, either upstream or downstream, the pricing solutions that you need are going to be a little bit different. And so actually, when we entered into our partnership with Metals Hub was in 2021, so it was before all of this nickel stuff. It was driven by that recognition, by that very strong conviction on our side, that if we at the LME want to stay relevant to the physical market, we have to make our core 6 contracts, copper, aluminium, zinc, nickel, tin, lead, we've got to make them as relevant as possible. But we also have to work with the market as solutions are delivered along each of those metal value chains, so that you can have pricing at each stage, because it's not enough to just have pricing at the commodity stage. So Class 2 nickel is a really good example of where we've said that we would really be keen to see new Class 2 solutions come to market. We're very happy to be part of those. Indeed, if those prices get traction, we can even list cash-settled contracts to them on the LME to allow people to hedge to them. But we're very clear that that kind of innovation, that kind of development would be very positive for the market, particularly the nickel market here. And in the second part of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about how I think Metals Hub is a great platform for doing that. There's a whole bunch of other stuff on this slide, which I'm not going to go into given time, but I did just want to leave you with, in this section, that sense that we are absolutely committed to building the market back, and obviously if there's anything we can do to help, if you use the LME or you want to use the LME, please let myself or my colleague Hugo know, and we're more than happy to take those conversations forward. You know, what we've seen looking at nickel is that clearly volumes fell very significantly on the nickel contract as we had those issues in 2022. We have seen them build back, although I think, as I mentioned, a lot of the Class 2 business has perhaps gone to index pricing. But the most important thing for us on nickel is the quality of liquidity on the market, and that's these graphs on the right. So we feel pretty good about the liquidity, both in terms of bid-offer spread coming down, the frequency of gaps in price moves. There's a lot more to do, and we'll continue to invest the time and the effort in that. But I did want to make the point there that we feel the LME nickel market is an easier place to trade now. So let's come on to the second part, which is the part that I'm really excited and passionate about, which is platform-based price discovery. So when we announced our partnership back in 2021, what we found exciting, as I mentioned, is the fact that we do these 6 core commodities, but Metals Hub is this incredible platform that can very easily and quickly and effectively do pricing of any element of that metals value chain in a way that a physically settled futures exchange simply can't. And I think there's maybe 2 big buckets around that. So one is forms of metals that are very important, and that was the Class 2 example that I just gave, and there are clearly others as well. But the other one, and one that I'd just like to illustrate as a little case study, because it's one that I find really fascinating, is around ESG and low carbon metals, because this is an area where I think our whole industry is being challenged, as you just heard the fantastic presentation on green steel, and that is where the world is going, and we all have to be part of that, and we're under a lot of pressure, as you'd imagine, from our stakeholders at the LME. So, LME sustainability, just to explain how we got into this, we started with this on responsible sourcing because there was, you may have read, some media coverage, I think back in 2017, about some of the brands who deliver on the LME having challenges with conflict finance and child labor, worse forms of child labor in their supply chains. And so we introduced our responsible sourcing requirements, where we basically said that if you want to be a listed brand, if as a producer you want your metal to be deliverable on the LME, you need to comply with these basic requirements that basically is the OECD due diligence guidance. So that's kind of a binary thing. But as soon as we started looking at that, we realized that there are all these other parameters around metal. So water usage, carbon footprint, respect for indigenous rights, tailings management, landscape restoration, that people are really interested in. And we have users come to us and say, how can I be confident that when I source metal on the LME or hedge metal on the LME, that the carbon footprint or the water footprint of my trading activity is within my acceptable parameters? And banks in particular, I think, are a really positive force on this. Banks are being driven by a green finance agenda, and they need confidence when they trade on venues like ours that they know what's going on. So we kind of see this challenge as being answered in 2 ways. So the first is around data, and the second is around trading access. So on data, what we launched is a system called LME Passport. And LME Passport is a technology which effectively allows us to assign every single piece of metal, every single cathode or billet or that comes through our warehouses, to assign that data based on its chemical and sustainability profiles. So the chemical data is mandatory, the certificates of analysis for everything except copper. We've now electronified those. The sustainability data is currently voluntary, but what we have had is a fantastic response from producers who want to get their sustainability data up on LME Passport. And just to give you an example, so Codelco, very strong partners of the LME, sort of back to 1877. They list their copper brands on the LME, as you'd expect, and what they do on LME Passport is to also disclose all this other data around Scope 1, Scope 2 emissions, ISO 14001, ISO 45001, etc. So you can now link up their metal coming through our warehouses with all this data that they've disclosed. And actually, the taxonomy allows you to disclose across all these dimensions: environmental, social, governance, etc. And we've seen this real desire by users to disclose and have access to that data. But why does that matter? Well, it's good to have access to data, but what people really, really want is to now go and be able to source data, to source metal, to sell metal, or to source metal on the basis of that data. So if you are a producer who is particularly proud of certain things that you're doing, to be able to disclose that and to have a market for what you're producing where you might hope to realize a premium. And on the other hand, if you're a consumer who has a carbon budget or has downstream users who have specific requirements, that you can go and source metal with those characteristics. And that is where I think the Metals Hub solution is absolutely what we need, and why I'm so excited by the partnership. Because the vision, certainly that I have, is that we can have the data on LME Passport, but let's look at aluminium as probably the most relevant example. So I'm an aluminium buyer, making whatever it is, automotive, aeronautics, packaging, and I want to source aluminium with less than or equal to 4 tons of CO2 per ton of metal. How do I do that? Well, I can come to a central platform such as Metals Hub, hopefully Metals Hub, and I come in and I set my parameters supported by the taxonomy data out of LME Passport. There are producers or merchants who have listed their metal for sale with those characteristics, and you have confidence that that's a real alignment of measuring, because as we all know in this space, the challenges about measuring and different standards and different disclosures, that's what we try to solve with LME Passport by ensuring that the disclosure lines up with the specific the specific regime, be that International Aluminium Institute or ASI or whatever it may be, and that you can bring together willing buyer and willing seller on the basis of data that both of them subscribe to, both of them agree to, and then create a price. So you have both automated the procurement process, but you've also started, as we say on the right, to create reliable price indices. Because this is the other big question that we get at the LME: why can't we produce a green premium? Well, we can't just produce a green premium at the LME, because we'd have to launch a physically settled green aluminium contract, probably wouldn't have liquidity. If it did, it would take a lot of liquidity away from the main contract. That's something that we've said that certainly now we're not planning to do. We don't think that our market is ready for that. But a spot platform, such as Metals Hub, can do that without taking liquidity from the main contract in parallel and start producing reliable pricing pretty much immediately. And that's something that really only a spot platform can do. So that is how we see the future of this. We're investing on the data side, but it's not going to be meaningful across the piece until we're able to make that metal tradable and create price signals from it. So that's really, as I say, what excites me about the opportunity here, and why we're so proud to partner. So in summary, and I think you've probably kind of already heard this today, but I do believe in it. What does the metals market of the future look like? I think it is sustainable. That is in every conversation that we have right now. I think it's digital. We're investing a lot in our technology on the trading side, new trading platform, etc. But I strongly believe digital procurement, spot trading, and pricing solutions are a big part of that. And it's going to be traded, right? Clearly we're a market. We like things to be traded. That's our business model, and we'd like to see more traded because I think that's actually good for the whole industry. So, in summary, that's what I wanted to cover. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matt, for the presentation. I'm very impressed personally, and that's my personal opinion, about all the work that has happened after March 2022 in the nickel market. So the LME has taken a lot of measures that such a thing that happened last year will most likely not happen again. Yep. And I know that there has been a lot of work going into this topic. I'm also very excited that the LME is embracing these topics, sustainable, digital, and traded, and developing digital solutions such as LME Passport, where the LME is investing its resources into topics which serve ultimately the entire industry. And that's also something where I would like to congratulate you on, Matt. And of course, also thank you for the nice words about MetalsHub. That's always appreciated. Thank you, Matt. Yeah. So we're ready to take a few questions for Matt from the audience.
I need a microphone though. Okay, I do have a microphone. Matt, thanks a lot. I mean, we've been discussing it a lot of times, but I think when it comes to establishing spot price discovery or spot trading of certain products, a lot of industry players complain actually about the current pricing mechanisms of certain products. Even the example of Class 2. Yep. There are various players in the industry that continuously complain about it. But at the same point in time, they struggle to establish a digital price setting mechanism. And it feels like children standing around a pool outside 33 degrees and nobody wants to jump into the water first. Why is that? What's your view on this? What is holding the industry back?
Yeah. So I think there's a few challenges when you're trying to establish a trading and pricing venue, whatever that might look like. I think that the first is that clearly we're in a world where compliance is a really important thing. And there's always this concern from industry participants, so if I go in and I'm one of a few, does that mean that that I'm disproportionately impacting the price, etc. And I think it's good that people think like that. It's good that we have a compliance mindset. It's good that we all want to do the right thing. But actually, if you have a regulated exchange or you have a very well set up spot platform with as we say on this slide, with the index methodology, the adjustments, excluding subjective elements, then I think we go a long way to reassuring the compliance departments in these organizations that this is a good thing to do. So the compliance issue is one that comes from a good place, but we need to help industry participants realize that actually transparent pricing is a regulatory plus. It's a good thing for all of us. So I think that's certainly one challenge that we have. A second challenge is obviously establishing specs, because we know that, say, with Class 2, as I mentioned, it can be, there's different views on exactly what should be traded. Again, that's where I think that spot platforms have a significant advantage over, say, a physically settled exchange contract for those things, because in a physically settled exchange contract, we have to have one single single standard deliverable form, whereas on a spot platform, you can make adjustments through a matrix where needed and actually bring some sense out of a range of different transactions. So that's a second challenge that we have that I think spot platforms solve. And then the third one, it's just natural human inertia, right? We all get that, right? We're all busy, we all have jobs to do, and this is maybe the thing that's sitting on your desk at 5 p.m. and it's easier to look at it tomorrow. But actually, I've been quite impressed, particularly after the nickel situation, about how much companies are putting effort into this. So look, it's a long journey to get benchmarks established, but I do feel a lot more optimistic now than perhaps ever in the past.
Some more question on the right.
I'm from the banking environment, so a question related to the regulation. Yep. In banking, we have EMIR and MiFID and many other aspects, and you mentioned rightfully that there obviously was a very large short position on the OTC markets. What is the current situation on discussions with the regulators on bringing some more transparency into the combined market of hedging?
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks. It's a great question, and we're very, very keen to make sure that that the exchanges and the regulators are working very closely together. You do have this challenge, as you pointed out, that the exchange oversees the on-exchange positions, and normally the national regulator oversees the OTC positions, but you've got to join them up to get a full view. So we have two strategies on that. The first is we are working very closely with our regulators, and actually in the UK, there's a consultation at the moment on some changes to our Financial Services and Markets Act that I hope will join up the exchange-traded and the OTC markets better. But in parallel, we have, as the LME, since March 2022, been asking our members at the big banks to give us the OTC data. Now, that's been a little bit controversial because a number of the banks have said, well, that's not really the LME data to see, that should be going to the regulator. But actually, the banks, or our members have, and I have to thank them for this, they have been cooperative, because I think everybody's seen how badly things can turn out if you don't have that data. So we do have a reasonable set of data on the OTC market now, thanks to our members being cooperative, and I think we feel much more able to see a big position like the March 22 one emerging. But I absolutely agree. There's more work to do to try to really bed that into regulation as well.
Thank you. Any more questions from the room? There's one question here from the winner of the Best Supplier Award.
Hello, my name is Sasha. I'm working for ThyssenKrupp. I have a question regarding the potential launch of other nickel platforms and contracts. How do you see that?
Yeah. So as I say, the position that we've taken, and obviously, we all operate in competitive markets, and the LME is no different. So we absolutely realize that other people may want to launch platforms. I mean, actually in nickel, there's already LME, there's Shanghai Futures Exchange, and you may have new people coming in as well. As I say, I think I would differentiate between new Class 1 platforms. There was a lot of talk about that kind of in March 22 and immediately afterwards. We don't hear quite so much about that now, but obviously if people want to launch those platforms, then they're very welcome to, and it's good for the industry to have choice. Most of the talk that I hear at the moment is about new Class 2 platforms, and on that, as I say, we've said that we think that it is positive for the industry to have new Class 2 options. There's been a lot of discussions. I don't think anyone's quite got there yet, but we'd be supportive of that happening. Indeed, we'd be happy to partner. And obviously it'd be great if that were with MetalsHub, but we're happy to be cooperative and be part of that, because I think Class 2, the Class 2 market is complex, and having other pricing solutions there could be a good thing.
Thank you. We would have time for one last final question. If there's no further question, then I say thank you very much, Matt, for coming. For all the other speakers, we had the book, The World for Sale, but I heard you already own it.
So Jack Farchi made me buy 5 copies when he published it. So I have 5 copies on my desk, but it's a very nice thought. Thank you very much.
So we will look for an alternative book, and I somehow have the feeling if Jack would write a second book, that maybe your name would appear in it, in a chapter about the March 2020 events.
Exactly. I'm looking forward to it.
So thank you very much,
Thanks
Matt.
so much. Cheers. Thanks.